that has been following the Lewis and Clark Trail since January of 2003. Started in Jefferson's home in Monticello, the same place the dream for a Western journey began. Went through the eastern states, then to St. Louis, from St. Louis up to the Mandan villages in North Dakota, then from North Dakota all the way to the Pacific Ocean, and now it's 2006, and we're on the return journey, just as Lewis and Clark were 200 years ago. All along on this journey, Lewis and Clark were meeting many different people. They had different languages, different cultures, and different backgrounds, and they met them with graciousness. They showed them the way. They often guided Lewis and Clark across difficult terrain. They gave them directions, and they traded them for transportation as well. So as you look at the Lewis and Clark story, realize that it is not just a story of Lewis and Clark, or just a story of the men who went with them, or the young woman who carried her small child and went across country, but it is also a story of the people they met along the way. So with that said, at this time I'd like to introduce our next presenter. This is George Heavy Runner. He is Blackfeet, and he has been in charge of getting this exhibit right here to the Blackfeet Reservation. He's been a wonderful host. Thank you very much, George. We're enjoying our stay here. And let's all please make him welcome.
Can you hear me? Thank you very much, and good afternoon. And as she said, this has been a work in progress. We're at least a couple years to put this event together and see where we go from here. My job today is to offer some perspectives, if you will, at least from the Blackfeet on the Lewis and Clark expedition, and talk a little bit about perspectives. And basically, that's what we have in respect to the expedition's trip up here. They first, with Lewis, decided to explore a little further north here. I think they were trying to expand the northern boundary, and so they moved up and followed the river up there to the site down here on the Camp Disappointment, and it rained and it was terrible weather for them, and they realized that they could not do any northward expansion, but we soon found out later they were going to certainly work on the westward expansion, and so they decided to pack up their bags and head back down, and which culminated in another encounter, not another encounter, at least an encounter with some members of our tribe there. Tanya, if you could hand out that handout there. In terms of perspectives, a lot of our history is oral history. And of course, on the other side, when you talk about what happened up at Camp Disappointment or at the fight site, the encounter with some of our young Blackfeet men, we have nothing but the journals, the memories of those men who were asked, I guess, or in some respects required to do journals for posterity purposes. But as I was putting this thing together, we also did our own accounting, if you will, and we did it through a process called winter counts. And so we had people, our historians, who over a period of times would write, if you will, in our own way about important events of that particular year. So as we talk about 1806 and coming up here, you'll notice there's nothing about Lewis and Clark there. And again, I think that's an interesting note in terms of perspectives. As we have been going over the 3 years of this event, and it's been all over the country, people have been really asking the Blackfeet, well, what's your perspective? Was this an important thing? Did it, and to what I have read and others have researched, it did not, maybe it was just a small blip on the radar screen. And so it did, but it did have some impact, as other historians have noted, as a result from the Two Medicine fight there. And so I want to offer that to you to at least know that in terms of perspectives, we had our way of recording our history, and we really were strong in the oral side of it. And can you imagine these guys coming up the river, and just imagine those three young men after they left the Camp Disappointment site and started to head down on to Medicine, and they were looking there, and they saw, oh, Captain Lewis, and I'm sorry this isn't as clear as it could be, because it's a real poignant picture of the river here, and checking it out. And I imagine there was a lot of tribes along the way that were up there on the bluff or on the banks and saw the expedition coming up the river and said, just what the heck's going on here, and who are these guys, and what are they dragging that big keelboat around for? But some of our people back then, in terms of their, and again, I wish this is a great picture of our mindset back then, our culture, our worldview, and places that we lived in, our neighborhoods, if you will, and the types of interactions we had as communities, and just all those type of things that were going on then in about 1806 there. We were having our ceremonies. You'll see across, if you've been over to the campgrounds over there and watched some of the dancing, it's more than just the dancing. A lot of the things that are going on prior to the contest dancing, there's ceremonies going on. There's remembrances. There's acknowledgments of people who passed away. There are all these type of things that we still hold on today, 200 years later, and we'll continue to do that. This gentleman here was named Wolfcalf, and I'm getting over to the area about the fight site when Lewis encountered 8 young men down there, and they were quite, yesterday a gentleman named Curly Bear Wagner described it quite well in terms of the encounter, and how they were pretty much scared of each other at the time, and they were eyeballing each other. But this gentleman here, his name was Wolfcalf, and there was an interview that was done with him, and he was 102 years old in 1895. He was one of the young Blackfeet men that were part of the party, and so that's our kind of central point in looking back to our people, to this gentleman, about what took place down there from that interview. This particular site, there's and again, perspectives. Is this area here that this sign that was erected by the Boy Scouts down in Cut Bank, and they built a fence around this area. You can't see it very well, but the sign's over there. Is this the actual site? Perspectives, if you will. You know, there seems to be, if you read Lewis's journal, how he describes the site, and you go down there, it makes me wonder sometimes too. And so there's other historical sites where, again, we put in the idea of perspective. Was that the real site or not? We didn't have no GPS at the time. The GPS was in the brains and the stars, if you will, there. But he described that this encounter, these kids, or if you will, were the 12 to 15 years old, and they were, as Curly Bear Wagner said, and I say Curly Bear Wagner because we have other historians. Darrell Kipp, you've heard Darrell Kipp's presentation. John Murray, a gentleman named Boss Racine, have looked at the history and looked at what was written and heard the stories they've heard, and they've offered their perspectives. And according to Curly Bear, they were just back from a raiding party of horses, probably from the Crow, and they run into them, and they got together that night to sit down, and they were talking about stories about where they were from, and they were talking about a camp up here of their people, a large camp there. As I read the journals, one thing that fascinated me, they told Lewis, and he wrote it in his journals, there was a white man amongst them up near the mountains about 1806, and I can only assume that was a fur trapper from up north. But I always wondered that if this encounter didn't happen, what would have happened if they would have took him up here and they would have had that meeting with that guy, or if they would have found out the Mariah's Pass over here, in terms of easier pass to get across the mountains, and whether we'd even be here today, telling you this history or perspectives about this area. So there's a lot of what ifs in terms of perspectives. And the thing that struck me as I researched and went out to Monticello, the first event they had out there, there was a professor named James Ronda that talked about this encounter. And what struck me the most was, as he described in his own perspective of the event that happened, and the young man that got stabbed and the other one that was shot by Lewis was, as they were getting ready to leave, according to James P. Ronda, they put one of the peace medals or medallions around the dead person's neck. And he's called it a calling card. And I really agree with him, because he said it was to show whoever came upon him of just who these people were. And I call it was a calling card of inevitability, of things to come, of things that were going to happen there. And I think that was a real moment for me as we had people like Alexander Culbertson that started to come up through the Missouri up through Fort Benton to start setting up the forts to trade, and then to marry into our tribe. And a lot of the fur trappers and people decided to do that in order to get in, if you will, and not be chased out. Because the way our people were, if you married in, we accepted you. And so it was a process there. A lot of the people that have the non-Indian names around here that also came up through Fort Benton or from Canada, they're married into our tribe there. And as a result, their ancestors are still around here today. And we start to move into that inevitability of change here. Over 200 years of towns starting to be built here on the Blackfeet Reservation. This old place called Sherburne Mercantile was one of the first traders on the reservation here. Him and another gentleman started setting up shop because they knew that our people needed all kinds of goods, and they started shipping things up through Fort Benton and just what have you. And change did start to happen. It just was a matter of time for us. And we went through a tumultuous time in the middle 1850s up to the 1900s with a starvation winter that happened in 1883, where we had hundreds of our people that starved down here at the old agency site because the federal policy was the agent for us thought that we could do pretty good on growing potatoes. I don't think this is Idaho or a place to grow potatoes, but policies like that had implications in terms of that. We had all kinds of things that start to happen to our people there. So this Lewis and Clark was done and was gone, and what we were dealing with was the inevitability of westward expansion. The times were changing, if you will, and there was nothing. I think if that didn't happen in that encounter, eventually it was going to happen. We were so far north, we were one of the last tribes, if you will, that really started to feel the brunt. The brunt that we felt was through the invisible brunt, and that was through smallpoxes and diseases that we couldn't see, but it was decimating our population. And we're more worried around the time when you're starving and when you're sick about just trying to survive. And so that's in terms of the change in our perspectives. And then so you may talk to George Heavyrunner about the Lewis and Clark experience, and you can go talk to John Murray, but it'll be quite different, but it'll have some same threads there. And it was I just want to share one more experience about this inevitability. I don't know if you've ever seen the National Lewis and Clark exhibit, have you? That's been going all over the country there. Well, if you get near the end, there's this one panel, and it talks about the encounter we had with those young men. And in that panel, there's a pistol, a replica pistol that Lewis supposedly had that shot the young man. And then there was an amulet that was, what they said in the panel was similar to what Lewis took from one of the young men. And then there was this shirt that was full of scalps. And it was really interesting to see on some of the shirt the blonde hair. There was red hair, and that was given to a museum many years ago by a gentleman that I think they met in Fort Union or somewhere, and they gave that, and this museum had it there. But it was interesting and quite emotional to see that amulet there, and then as I remember back and reading about that encounter, because Lewis's rationale was that they were sleeping and the guys were trying to steal their horses or their rifles, so they had to defend themselves. But after I read what Lewis did in terms of that, after they killed the person, and the person was injured, they took their horses and some other stuff, they said. So I wonder who stole from whom at that particular point there, because it turns out as they headed out and they were figuring some of our people are after them, they did take their horses and some other things there, which were part of the collection that they took back there. But that's not talked about too often, so I think in terms of perspectives, we should think about that one in terms of the rationale of why they decided to kill those young men. Now, there was another story that I heard from up here, is that it really didn't happen that any stealing was going on, is that one perspective was that we're gambling people, and they probably sat down and did some games of chance, and these young men were beating them, and they got angry about it because they were probably bartering for horses or for what have you. And this other person's perspective is that they were winning, and they didn't want to give them up. So that's another perspective. I was interested when I heard that, and I thought about it because I was interested in the way Lewis wrote his journals about that. He was very careful to lay out that they were using all restraint as possible, that they were not going to shoot till they see the whites of your eyes, and that kind of perspective, if you will. And I always thought it was a little shaky or suspect the way he was careful about how they did that encounter, but it sounded a little nebulous, if you will, because the way they described how they got the hell out of there. I mean, they covered 80 miles all the way, just so they must have knew something was up there, because again, our reputation was preceding us about the running into the Blackfeet. We had this reputation, if you will, as pretty mean people. We defended our territories, and we did. I did more research about that, and in fact, we were probably the bad dudes, if you will, around that time there. And it's interesting because as the Corps 2 came here to the Blackfeet Reservation, I've enjoyed the encounter I've had with the park rangers, who are a representative of the government, just like the expedition, and so they've been a little of those bad boys on the planet, if you will, there. But and so it really has come to when you talk about the expedition, you just can't just talk about that particular moment. For us, and in my view, as things changed here, and in 1895, when I interviewed Wolfchild, there was another event going on, and that was the creation of Glacier National Park, or as one gentleman called the first theme park in America. They started them. If you go up the mini glaciers, you'll see it's kind of the Swiss atmosphere there. So it was interesting as those things were changing in 1895. We were signing another treaty called the Ceded Strip, where that land was being taken, and there's controversy today about the border, where the border stops, and in terms of our reservation boundary line. So maybe there's always been this kind of a little nebulous relationship with Glacier National Park, but that's not going to be our point on the last presentation. We're going to talk about a formal relationship as a government-to-government relationship there. But I thought it was kind of interesting to hear that our good friend Mr. Morehouse has his canoe over there, and the other morning we came here to see how things were going, and he was checking it all out, and one of his ropes, or several of his ropes, got cut, and he was feeling kind of bad. Well, I told him, well, you just got to remember where you're at. You're in Blackfeet country. There was probably a young kid come by. He needed a rope, probably cut it, and one of our security people say they had to chase some kids out. They were trying to rope a cat, so probably just took the rope. It looked handy, and then this morning he thought he lost some more items, but one of the park rangers saw the stuff there and put it away for him. But I was trying to remind him they were probably just counting coup on you, and you should be honored. But that was not the way he felt this morning. I've got to move into this other area about this other perspective. When I went, this thing got over at 6 and went over to the opening ceremonies of our dance there. They had the grand entry. If you've Have you all seen the grand entry yet? It's quite awesome. You get there and the people all come in, the different dancers, and and so I was standing there and I saw, oh, well, there's a lot of you out there that were taking pictures. You had your movie cameras, and there's people. And I was just looking around and checking out the non-Indians because we see it every year. They're just awed by all the beautiful pageantry, if you will, and all that. And I kind of chuckled to myself about that, and because we see that all the time. And so after that was all over, I went home, and I'm one of those C-SPAN junkies. First thing I turned on was C-SPAN, and I was kicking back. I was tired. It was a long day. And they were doing a series on the nation's capital and all the buildings in Washington, D.C., and they had Senator Frist, who the majority leader for the Senate. He was talking about his office. They had Ted Kennedy talking about his room called the Hideaway above the majority leader's office, and the corridors and all the things. And it was interesting to hear the gentleman talk about the fireplace or the chair or the book, and all the objects to us have no life in them, they will, and they were marveling that they were 200 years old. And it was good to hear the history, because I like our American history as well, of where Thomas Jefferson might have stood, or Aaron Burr, or where the House of Representatives, and we're talking about the very foundations of our government and everything, but they're all referring to chairs, and I'm telling you this because when we refer to we're a living history, and what you see over there has been going on a long time. I was just reading an article before I came here where a gentleman was describing how we had dancing arenas where we had several of them. The Blackfeet were dancing here, and our Crees had theirs. Then they had this big one, and when we'd have our celebration, then they'd get together. So if you're at those dances, you hear intertribal, There's some reason for that all going on there. But I wanted to share that with you because that look I saw in those people's eyes and the pictures, it was, to me, it was like a yearning to witness living history that is going on, that's going on. And we just don't do it just for 4 days there. Some of you are missing. There's ceremonies going on. There's people that are getting, like I said, getting honored for coming back from Iraq. I mean, if you want to talk about patriotism, you're talking to people that are the true patriot. Every time one of our people come home, and proportion as far as Native Americans, we probably have the largest number of people that have been involved in the wars there. So we're very proud of that. That goes back to our history and culture about our warriors who we hold up high there. So a lot of things go on during these 4 days because it's an opportunity for families to get together. You walk around the camps, you see people laughing and talking, and they're remembering last time that they got together. And as I was telling Tanya there, that you have the tent of many voices. Well, you got the tent of many voices over there, and it's alive. And so you don't have to walk through the panels here and visualize. You can just go over and see that in living color, if you will. Huh? And so it must have been tough. Imagine people that in the 1900 there that were 70 or 80 years old, our tribe was at the lowest point in terms of our population, of starvation, and all that was going on, and there must have been some disparity going on. The feeling that will things ever get any better. I want to share with you, if I could, I come across this prayer. This gentleman named George Bird Grinnell, kind of one of the historians, recorded this prayer, and it was a prayer made by an older Blackfeet to the Chief Mountain. The Chief Mountain is this last mountain over here, and that's very important to us. And to me, it was done about 1903, and it really reflected the results of the inevitability, all the federal policies at a pretty much low point in our time as a tribe. And I'll just share this with you. This is what this gentleman was saying. He says, "Hear now, you chief of mountains, you stand foremost. Listen, I say, to the mourning of the people. Now are the days truly become evil and are not as they were in ancient times. But you have seen the days. Under your fallen garments the years are buried. Then there were days full of joy, For the buffalo covered the prairie, and the people were content. Warm dwellings had they then, soft robbers for coverings, and the feasting was without end. Hear now, you mountain chief, listen, I say, to the mourning of the people. Their dwellings and their remnants now are made of strange, thin stuff. And the long days come and go without feast, for our buffalo are gone. Warm dwellings had they then, unless indeed the drum, for who would sing and dance while hunger gnawed within him? Like an old blind man, your people feel their way along, falling over unseen things, for the gods are angry. In vain the usual offerings to the sun. Where now the 100 tongues, the snow-white robes, which always were his share? And because we cannot find them, he turns away his eyes, making our medicine useless. So then we fail and die, and even as old men who cannot see the way. Hear now, who stand among the clouds, are you who stand among the clouds. Pity, I say, your starving people. Give back those happy days. Cover once more the prairies with our real food, that your children may live again. Hear, I say, the prayer of your unhappy people. Bring back those ancient days. Then our medicine will be strong. Then will you be happy, and the aged die content. And I was really struck by that in terms of a kind of reflection of how our people were feeling. And I kind of want to end with that, but I don't want to end with that in terms of a sad note, because one of the things in our culture and the way we believe, and we have people that come visit us, that we always like to show our respect for them, and we like to give them a gift. And as this thing was over, and I was over at the camps there, waiting for the opening ceremonies, I was talking to Tanya, and I said, we ought to get some of those park rangers and those people over there a gift. That's our way to do it, and that's an enduring trait in us to always share. And I think you've seen that all along the river as Lewis and Clark came up and went back, of our people that opened their arms, if you will, and helped them out the best they could. And so I went to this stand here, because this gentleman, Dick Basher, who's the American Indian liaison, and I was explaining to her that he's been going up along the trail and back, and works with the tribes to ensure that when we put on an event, that is done with respect, that we're not doing a celebration, we're doing a commemoration, we're doing an opportunity for us to have some reflection on these last 200 years, and you'll probably hear that and continue that, and he's been doing a good job. So I explained to this lady that I wanted to buy something from her, but I couldn't buy it. I have this budget, and I was doing this purchase order deal, and she was just listening to me. And she's a member of our tribe, I believe. Tanya, is she a member of our tribe? And her name is Three Rivers. She has a stand there. So what are you looking for? So I saw this knife here, and I said, well, that's not bad. It's pretty nice there. It's had a bone handle, and I asked her how much that was, and she was kind of looking at me. She said, $75. And I said, really? Okay. And I said, well, then she turned around and Tanya, if you can just, Dick, could you come up and I'll finish this story. And Tanya, could you bring that up, please? And so that one there. And then if we can get, is Kevin around by any chance? Or, okay, Kevin, then you can come up. But anyway, I was talking to the lady about that, and so she had this behind her. If you could just maybe hand that to me, or come up, Tanya, if you want. And I was explaining to her, and she pulled that off, and then I said, oh boy, how much is this going to cost? And she looked at me and she said, I listened to your story about this man. He must be a good man. And she said, here, I'll give it to you. She said, that's our way. And Dick, I'm going to give you this on behalf of this lady. She has a stand there. I'm going to give you her card because there's a little quid pro quo there. She wants you to make sure you do a little bit of... She gave me just one, if you will, and if I can't find it really quick here, I make sure I'll get it to you. But I thought that was really nice. I thought it was really a reflection, if you will, of where our people are at today and that. And so Dick, that's from that lady there, and I'll give you the card there. And she was really nice. I was just blown away by her generosity And we in turn repaid the kindness. Not too long ago, Tanya and I went over there and gave her some gifts there, and it was all good. And she just wants you to have that and wants you to keep up the good work. And Kevin, if you could come up, we have some things we'd like to give to your rangers here. I think they were worried that the Blackfeet were going to get their revenge and we were going to burn down the keel boat. And I think all the Indian country would have cheered, but we decided not to do that. But we have some, we'd like to give you this here. This is one of the pouches that the Bicentennial did over the last 3 years. They contracted tribes to do a lot of these pouches to put the Lewis and Clark commemorative coin in. And so we had a few left over, and you just can pull that out. You can put whatever you think you might want one in there. That's you can show that to the audience there. And that's our way, and we have some other ones. Now you're going to be the leader here, and you're going to have to make the determination of giving these to your staff. And so if you've been good to Kevin, you'll probably get a good one. If you haven't, that may not happen. And also back there, and we'll just give to your staff, Tanya made up some bread there, and we're going to just share with you. And that's the way we are. And I imagined as the expedition came up, they gave them things, gifts were exchanged, if you will, and gave them something to eat, or they showed them the way there. And so I just kind of want to end with that, and we'll open up some questions. So getting back to the theme of perspectives, basically that's my perspective, if you will. So we may have, the next time you run into one of our tribal members, they'll have their different perspectives. But I think there's some truths that run through this whole thing, and that's generosity, just humanity, treating people good as you would want to be treated there. And after 200 years, maybe we didn't get, we got the short stick of all that. But can you imagine after 200 years, who would have thought the Belarusian people still have their homeland, their language, their history, and their culture, and that's their strength. And you people come here to see that, because you have St. Patrick's Day, Columbus Day, you have your days, but we have those 360 some days out of the year in terms of our history and remembering. And if you listen to Daryl Kipp's presentation a couple hours ago, he was talking about the language, our language immersion schools, where our young people now are being immersed in our language to hold on to our language, and they're building schools. Now they're talking about building a high school. So we're very pleased that our endurance, our perseverity is going to let us continue on. And thank you very much. So get over for questions.
Thank you very much, George Heavy Runner. And audience, if you have some questions that you would like to ask, please raise your hand. I'll come around with a microphone, and feel free to ask questions. This is your chance. Yes, ma'am.
This morning, Daryl referred to the Blackfoot tribe, and I've always thought it was the Blackfeet. How do you use Blackfoot and Blackfeet in your speaking?
Well, we have a confederacy called the Blackfoot Confederacy. We have sister tribes up in Canada. And at one time, when we were this huge group, if you will, our organization, we were, our land base, if you will, was from the Saskatchewan River down to the Yellowstone. In order to have something like that, you had to have an organization. And so we're a lot alike in our language and in our culture, what have you. And so that's the Blackfoot Confederacy. Now the Blackfeet, why are we called the Blackfeet? You're getting back to perspectives again. There are some that say somebody saw us walking out of a forest, a recent forest fire, and our moccasins were black, huh? And then there's other perspectives. And I've been looking at them, if you will, but that's the English word. In our own language, we know each other in our own native tongue, if you will, there. So Blackfeet, and there's other tribes. Mostly all the other tribes have the English version, and due to the federal government and those type of things, when they started to form reservations and all the conformity and stuff there. So Blackfoot there, to us is all our tribes. Again, that's my perspective. Now, there might be somebody come up here and say, no, you're wrong. Here's how it's done there. So there, so there you go.
Right. We have another question right here.
What can you tell us about the Peony Blackfeet?
The what?
Peony, am I saying that right?
Picani?
Peony?
Picani.
P-I-I-A-N-I. Peony?
Picani. I don't know what book you was reading.
Well,
It's not something we're familiar with. But well, we're the Picani. You're talking to one of them, but I don't think I've ever talked to a Peony. I'm not sure. Unless somebody else knows in the audience, I've never heard of that. So maybe it's just a spelling that was a little different there.
Some other questions for Mr. Heavy Runner. Well, with that, thank you all very much for coming. Let's please give George Heavy Runner a show of appreciation.